Did the Mu Continent and Atlantis really exist? Hello, and welcome. Today, we are diving into two of the greatest mysteries of human history, the continent of Mu and Atlantis. Did these legendary civilizations, said to have disappeared in the depths of the oceans thousands of years ago, really exist? While Atlantis, written by Plato, tells the story of the dramatic collapse of an island empire, Mu rises as a forgotten paradise in the Pacific in James Churchward's vision. So, are these just myths, or do they once bear traces of reality? In this video, we will embark on a journey from ancient texts to modern science, and we invite you to lift the curtain of this secret. If you are ready, let's get started. Part 1. The origin of the Mu Continent and Atlantis myths. The Mu Continent and Atlantis are the most famous examples of lost continent myths in human history. Both myths tell of land masses that were once thought to have existed, hosted an advanced civilization, and were destroyed by cataclysms due to flooding. However, there are long-standing debates on the origins, historical basis, and scientific validity of these myths. In this article, we will examine how the Mu Continent and Atlantis myths emerged, what sources they were fed from, and their place in humanity's imagination. The origin of the Atlantis myth. The Atlantis myth first appeared in written history in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, 429 to 347 BC. In these works, Plato depicts Atlantis as a technologically and militarily superior island civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Strait of Gibraltar. According to the story, Atlantis conquered much of Western Europe and Africa around 9,500 BC, but failed in a war against Athens and sank to the bottom of the ocean in a great disaster overnight. Plato's account of Atlantis is based on a story that Sonchus, an Egyptian priest, passed on to the Greek poet Solon. Solon carried this information from Egypt to Greece in the 6th century BC, and the story was passed down through the family from generation to generation and reached Plato's teacher, Socrates. Plato seems to have used Atlantis to support his theory of the ideal state and to convey a moral message. A civilization corrupted by arrogance and greed is punished by the gods. The origin of the Mu Continent myth. The Mu Continent myth is a more recent myth than Atlantis, emerging in the 19th century. The person who founded this legend was the French archaeologist and explorer Augustus Le Plongeon, 1825 to 1908. While examining the Mayan ruins in Yucatan, Le Plongeon claimed that the Mayan civilization was older than Egypt and Greece, and that its origins were based on a lost continent. He named this continent Mu. He derived the name from a word he mistranslated in the Madrid Codex, Troano Codex. According to Le Plongeon, Mu was located in the Atlantic Ocean, and the survivors of the catastrophe founded the Mayan and Egyptian civilizations. This claim was an early speculation that combined Atlantis with Mu. The real popularizer of the Mu legend was the British explorer and writer James Churchward, 1851 to 1936. Churchward claimed that he met Tibetan monks in India in the 1880s and deciphered ancient documents called the Nakal Tablets in the Naga Maya language. According to these tablets, Mu was a continent located in the Pacific Ocean. It had a population of 64 million, an advanced civilization, and was sunk by volcanic eruptions and earthquakes around 12,000 BC. Churchward argued that Mu was the common origin of civilizations such as the Egyptian, Mayan, Indian, and Easter Island, and he detailed this theory in books such as The Lost Continent of Mu, 1931. Part 2. James Churchward's Theories, Ancient Knowledge of Mu. James Churchward's Theories. Mu's Ancient Knowledge. James Churchward, 1851 to 1936, as an English explorer, writer, and researcher, is one of the most influential names in introducing the legend of the lost Mu continent to the modern world. According to Churchward, Mu was a huge continent located in the Pacific Ocean, and the first major civilization in human history. His theories suggest that Mu had an advanced civilization, that the knowledge of this civilization formed the basis of other cultures around the world, and that it was eventually destroyed by a catastrophe. Churchward's claims are shaped within a framework that is both esoteric and speculative, and have a deep connection with the occultism and alternative history movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. The origin of Churchward's theories. Churchward's theories about the Mu continent begin with an experience he had in India in the 1880s. According to his claim, while serving in the British Army, he met a high-ranking priest in a Tibetan monastery, and this priest showed him ancient documents called the Nakul tablets. Churchward claims that these tablets were written in the Naga Maya language and that they describe the history of the Mu continent in detail. He claims that he deciphered these tablets under the priest's guidance and thus discovered a lost part of human history. However, he provided no evidence for the physical existence of these tablets and left their whereabouts uncertain. Churchward states that he later developed his theories by examining Mayan ruins in Mexico and Central America. It is also clear that he was influenced by Augustus Le Plongeon's work that associated the Mayan civilization with Mu. Churchward combined these observations and the information he claimed to have learned from the tablets, and systematically presented them in his books, such as The Lost Continent of Mu, 1931, Children of Mu, 1931, and Sacred Symbols of Mu, 1933. Part 3. Plato's Atlantis Narrative and Historical Connections. Plato's Atlantis Narrative and Historical Connections. Atlantis is one of the most famous lost civilization myths in human history, and its origins date back to the works of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, 429 to 347 BC. This story, which first appeared in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, tells of an advanced island civilization that was claimed to have once existed and its dramatic destruction. The question of whether Plato's Atlantis narrative was written as a philosophical allegory or whether it was based on a historical event has attracted the attention of researchers and enthusiasts both since ancient times and in the modern period. In this article, we will examine Plato's Atlantis narrative in detail, discuss its historical connections, and the possible truth behind this myth. Plato's Atlantis narrative. Source and content. Atlantis is introduced in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias during a discussion between Socrates, Timaeus, Critias, and Hermocrates. While the story is briefly summarized in Timaeus, a more detailed description is presented in Critias, but this second dialogue ends before it is completed. According to Plato, the Atlantis story comes from the Greek poet and lawgiver Solon, who lived in the 6th century BC. Solon received this information from a priest, called Sonchus in some sources, in the Egyptian city of Sais, and it was passed down from generation to generation within the family. Characteristics of Atlantis. Location. Atlantis is described as a large island in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Strait of Gibraltar. Time. The story takes place around 9,000 years before Plato's time, around 9,500 BC. Civilization. Atlantis is an island nation with advanced technology and military power that has established a vast empire. Its capital is depicted as a magnificent city surrounded by concentric water channels and walls, filled with temples, palaces, and harbors. Catastrophe. After Atlantis is defeated in a war with Athens, it is punished by the gods and sinks to the bottom of the ocean, in a day and a night by earthquakes and floods. Plato describes Atlantis as a civilization ruled by kings descended from Poseidon. The island has rich natural resources, such as a mysterious metal called orichalcum, and fertile land. However, over time, moral corruption and greed lead Atlantis to collapse. Plato's purpose: a philosophical allegory. Plato's purpose in describing Atlantis seems to be to convey a philosophical message rather than to present a historical document. While Timaeus contains a cosmological discussion about the creation and order of the universe, Critias aims to embody the idea of an ideal state. In this context, Atlantis may have been used as the opposite of the ideal society described by Plato in his work Republic. A civilization that pursues power and wealth and distances itself from virtue will inevitably face destruction. Athens, on the other hand, triumphs over Atlantis as a simple but virtuous state. This allegorical interpretation is the main basis of scholars who argue that Plato created Atlantis as a completely fictional tool. The fact that there is no trace of Atlantis in any Greek or Egyptian source before Plato suggests that the story arose from the philosopher's imagination rather than a historical basis. However, Plato's claim that it is based on a story from Egypt has fueled speculation that the narrative may refer to a real event. Historical connections. Is there a real source of inspiration? Whether Plato's Atlantis narrative has any historical basis has long been a subject of debate. If the story is not fiction, what events or places may have inspired Plato? Here are some possible connections and theories regarding this question. 1. The Santorini Thera eruption. Around 1600 BC, a massive volcanic eruption occurred on the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea. The eruption weakened the centers of the Minoan civilization, such as Knossos, with huge tsunamis and ash falls. The island partially collapsed and was submerged. The collapse of Santorini is similar to the depiction of Atlantis sinking overnight. The advanced architecture and seafaring power of the Minoan civilization also recall Atlantis. This event, 1,200 years before Plato's time, may have been recorded in Egyptian records and reached Greece via Solon. 2. The destruction of Helike. In 373 BC, the city of Helike, located on the Gulf of Corinth, was submerged by an earthquake and tsunami. Helike was a new phenomenon in Plato's time and was known to the Athenians. The sudden destruction of Helike parallels the catastrophe of Atlantis. However, this event does not match Plato's dating of Atlantis to 9,500 BC and may have inspired the dramatic elements of the story. 3. The Trojan War and the Sea Peoples. Around 1200 BC, at the end of the Bronze Age, mysterious groups called the Sea Peoples caused devastation in the eastern Mediterranean. These invasions accelerated the collapse of civilizations such as the Hittites and Mycenaeans. Plato's depiction of Atlantis as an empire threatening Athens can be linked to the attacks of the Sea Peoples. The fact that these events are documented in Egyptian records supports the theory that Solon may have heard the story from Egypt. 4. Egyptian records and flood myths. Plato says that the Atlantis story came from Egypt. In Egypt, narratives such as the flooding of the Nile River or the flood myths of Mesopotamia, for example, the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, may have formed the basis of a catastrophe-themed story. However, there is no explicit mention of a place called Atlantis in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Theories on the location of Atlantis. Plato's phrase, "beyond the Pillars of Hercules," has diversified efforts to locate Atlantis. The Mediterranean. Islands such as Santorini, Crete, or Sicily are often suggested. The Atlantic Ocean. Places such as the Azores, The Canary Islands or the Bahamas support the ocean theory. The Caribbean or America. Some modern writers associate Atlantis with pre-Columbian America. Antarctica. More speculative theories see Atlantis as a continent covered in ice. However, geological data show that it is unlikely that a large island in the Atlantic Ocean could have sunk in a short time. Therefore, it is more likely that a historical Atlantis was connected to a smaller catastrophe in the Mediterranean. Modern science accepts that Atlantis was a fiction created by Plato. Archaeological and geological evidence does not support the existence of such a civilization in 9500 BC. At that time, humanity was still in the hunter-gatherer stage and did not have the technology to establish an advanced island empire. Nevertheless, it is not denied that real catastrophes such as Santorini may have provided an indirect basis for Plato's story. Culturally, the Atlantis myth reflects humanity's desire for a lost golden age. Since the Renaissance, with geographical discoveries and scientific developments, efforts to find Atlantis have increased. Literature, e.g., Francis Bacon's The New Atlantis, and popular culture, e.g., Disney's Atlantis, the Lost Empire, have reshaped this myth. Part 4. Is it real or just a myth? Throughout human history, stories about lost civilizations have been told. The magnificent island of Atlantis, buried in the depths of the ocean, the lost paradise of the Mu continent in the Pacific, or the mysterious traces of Lemuria. These legends claim that advanced civilizations that once existed were destroyed by catastrophe. However, the following question always lingers in our minds. Are these stories based on a real foundation, or are they merely products of human imagination? Although myths such as Atlantis and Mu contradict historical findings, their origin and impact create a debate that blurs the boundaries of reality and myth. In this article, we will examine the truth behind the legends of the lost continent, scientific evaluations, and the meaning myths carry for humanity. The origin of myths, inspired by reality or born of fiction. Legends of lost civilizations are usually fed by ancient sources or oral traditions. Plato's Atlantis narrative appears in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias in the 4th century BC. Plato presents Atlantis as a story passed down from Egypt to Solon, which gives the narrative a historical flavor. However, Plato's purpose seems to be to support his theory of the ideal state and to teach a moral lesson. The continent of Mu, on the other hand, became popular with James Churchward's speculations in the 19th century. Churchward shares information he claims to have learned from the Nacal tablets, but the existence of these tablets is never proven. What both myths have in common is that they depict a Golden Age civilization destroyed by catastrophe. This theme is also seen in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Mesopotamia, the Bible, and flood stories in Indian myths. So, are these similarities coincidental, or are they reflections of a real event in different cultures? Some researchers suggest that these myths were inspired by prehistoric natural disasters, for example, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, or floods at the end of the Ice Age. However, these disasters do not indicate the sinking of a continent, but rather local destruction. Part 5. Possible Sunken Cities, DNA and Language Connections. Human history is full of the contradictory role of water as both a source of life and a destructive force. While legends tell of lost continents like Atlantis or mysterious civilizations like Mu, science and archaeology reveal traces of real submerged cities. These sunken cities can shed light on humanity's past, not only through physical remains, but also through DNA and linguistic connections. So, what are these sunken cities? Do they really exist? And how do they relate to the genetic and linguistic heritage of human history? In this article, we will explore possible submerged cities, examine their DNA and linguistic connections, and evaluate the place of these findings in modern science. Possible sunken cities. Archaeological evidence. Cities have been discovered around the world that have been submerged by rising sea levels, earthquakes, tsunamis, or volcanic activity. Contrary to legend, these sites can be confirmed by physical evidence. Here are some notable examples. 1. Pavlopetri. Located in the Aegean Sea in southern Greece, Pavlopetri was a thriving port city during the Bronze Age around 2800 BC. It is thought to have sunk due to earthquakes around 1000 BC. Discovered in 1967, the city has been found to contain streets, houses, tombs, and ceramics. It lies at a depth of approximately 9 meters. Pavlopetri is one of the oldest known sunken cities in the world and may be linked to the Minoan civilization. 2. Dwarka. Located in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Gujarat, Dwarka is known as the sacred city of Krishna in Indian mythology. It is estimated to have sunk around 1500 BC. Among the sunken structures discovered in the 1980s are stone walls, columns, and the remains of a harbor. Carbon dating shows that some of the findings date back to 7500 BC. Dwarka has transformed from a mythological city into a historical reality and is associated with the Harappan civilization. 3. Herakleion. Located in the Mediterranean near Alexandria, Herakleion was a port city around 1200 BC. It sank due to earthquakes and liquefaction in the 8th century BC. Discovered in the 2000s, the city has yielded temples, statues, ships, and inscriptions. It is located at a depth of 6 to 7 meters. Herakleion was the intersection of ancient Egyptian and Greek trade and was active until the time of Cleopatra. 4. Yonaguni Monument. Located in the Pacific Ocean on the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, this structure is a complex thought to be man-made around 10,000 BC. It sank when the water level rose at the end of the Ice Age. Discovered in 1986, the structures include stepped pyramids, roads, and terraces. But whether they are natural or man-made is debatable. If man-made, Yonaguni may be the oldest submerged settlement from the Ice Age. 5. Black Sea shipwrecks. Settlements that sank in a sudden flood around 5600 BC on the Black Sea coast. This event is known as the Black Sea Flood. Wooden houses, tools, and traces of agriculture have been found on the coasts of Bulgaria and Turkey. There are remains preserved at a depth of 100 meters. These shipwrecks represent early agricultural societies of the Neolithic period and are associated with the origin of flood myths. DNA connections, genetic traces. Sunken cities can provide important clues in understanding the migration routes and genetic heritage of human communities. People who fled these settlements with the rise of sea levels may have spread to surrounding areas and carried their DNA. Here are some possibilities: Pavlopetri and Minoan DNA. The inhabitants of Pavlopetri are thought to belong to the Minoan civilization. DNA analyses conducted in Crete show that the Minoans were a mixture of immigrants from Anatolia and Europe. The sinking of Pavlopetri suggests that this genetic pool may have influenced the Greek mainland. Dwarka and Indian genetics. Dwarka's connection to the Harappan civilization may explain genetic diversity in South Asia. The Dravidian and Aryan mix of the Indian subcontinent suggests that coastal cities like Dwarka were shaped by trade and migration. The Black Sea Flood and Europe. The Black Sea Flood of 5600 BCE may have accelerated the spread of Neolithic farmers from Anatolia to Europe. Genetic studies confirm that early farming communities in Europe originated in Anatolia. Escapees from sunken cities may have played a role in this migration. Yonaguni and the Pacific. If Yonaguni is man-made, it may be genetically linked to the Austronesian peoples who spread to the Pacific Islands. Their DNA reflects migrations from the Asian mainland. However, it is difficult to extract DNA directly from sunken cities. Underwater conditions degrade genetic material, so connections are inferred indirectly through genetic data from surrounding areas. Language connections, traces of oral heritage. Sunken cities may have also been part of linguistic evolution and the spread of myths. Migrating communities may have carried their languages and stories to new regions, which may have created bridges between language families. Pavlopetri and Indo-European languages. The sunken cities of the Minoan civilization may have contributed to the spread of early forms of the Indo-European language family, such as Mycenaean Greek. Pavlopetri's location supports this linguistic interaction. Dwarka and Dravidian languages. Dwarka may be associated with the origins of the Dravidian languages. Although the Harappan script has not yet been deciphered, the sinking of Dwarka may have influenced the linguistic heritage in South India. Heracleion and Mediterranean languages. Heracleion was the intersection of Egyptian, Greek, and Phoenician languages. Its sinking may have indirectly shaped the spread of these languages in the Mediterranean. Black Sea and flood myths. The Black Sea flood may be the origin of the flood stories in Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the Bible. This event may have carried narratives derived from Proto-Indo-European into Europe and Asia. Linguistic connections are inferred from myths and word origins, not direct evidence. For example, the similarity of the word flood in different languages, Sumerian Dub, Akkadian Abubu, suggests a shared memory of sunken cities. Part 6. Conclusion and Discussion. This article has examined the origin stories of both myths. It has been emphasized that Atlantis derives from Plato's works, while Mu derives from the speculations of Le Plongeon and Churchward. Historical and cultural contexts have been examined. Churchward's claims that the continent of Mu is located in the Pacific, based on the Nyokal tablets, and his view that Mu was a universal civilization with its advanced technology have been detailed. The depiction of Atlantis in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, its philosophical purpose, and possible historical connections, such as Santorini, have been discussed. The scientific validity of both myths has been questioned. The lack of geological and archaeological evidence has been compared with the cultural psychological reality of the myths. Common points. Both myths tell of an advanced civilization destroyed by earthquakes, floods, or volcanic eruptions. This reflects humanity's fragility in the face of nature. Atlantis and Mu represent the idea of a superior civilization in the past. This suggests nostalgia and a desire for an idealized past. Flood stories, e.g., the Epic of Gilgamesh, Noah's flood, and similar symbols link both myths to broader mythological traditions. Geology, plate tectonics, and archaeology do not support the rapid sinking of a large continent, suggesting that both stories are fictional. Differences. Atlantis comes from the writings of Plato in the 4th century BC, while Mu comes from the modern speculations of Churchward in the 19th century. This suggests that Atlantis is the older and classical myth, while Mu is the more recent and popular myth. Plato used Atlantis as a moral and philosophical allegory, while Churchward presented Mu as an attempt to explain the origins of human history. Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean, Mu in the Pacific Ocean, reflecting geographical and cultural differences. While historical events such as Santorini were suggested for Atlantis, the evidence for Mu, Nyokal tablets, is completely unverifiable and speculative. Scientific and cultural perspectives. The articles emphasized that both legends were fiction rather than a physical reality. However, it was accepted that local disasters such as the Santorini explosion and the Black Sea flood could have inspired the myths. It was stated that Atlantis and Mu had a deep place in the imagination of humanity and maintained their popularity in literature, cinema, and alternative history theories. The articles have an informative and analytical tone. They offer both the romantic appeal of the legends and scientific criticism in a balanced way. While questioning the reality of the myths, their symbolic importance in human history is also respected. Plato's Atlantis is an allegory written to support a moral lesson and the idea of an ideal state. Churchward's Mu is an attempt to present a speculative origin to human history. Although their purposes are different, both reflect humanity's curiosity about its past and its search for meaning. The Mu Continent and Atlantis Legends, although they have different origins and narratives, are mirrors reflecting the common experiences and dreams of humanity. Atlantis, shaped by Plato's classical philosophy, has a more ancient past than Mu, which came to life with Churchward's modern speculations. However, both present a mythological reality rather than a scientific reality. Historical catastrophes, Santorini, the Black Sea flood, may have inspired these stories, but instead of a continental sinking, these legends represent local events. As a result, these legends represent the endless desire for discovery in our minds rather than presenting a concrete map of humanity's past. Yes, we discovered the secrets of the Mu Continent and Atlantis together. From Plato's moral story to Churchward's bold speculations, these legends, although far from scientific reality, leave deep traces in the imagination of humanity. Perhaps the ashes of Santorini or the waves of the Pacific sowed the seeds of these myths. But the real truth lies not in the stones, but in what these stories tell us. What do you think? Did Atlantis and Mu really exist? Or are they just dreams created by our minds? Share your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you on the next mysterious journey. Goodbye.